Every human being, and clearly people with ADHD, we're all wired to be negative. I think of it as mental hygiene. I need a consistent practice of positive mental hygiene. The same way we need a consistent practice of positive oral hygiene. Well, I brushed my teeth yesterday. Does that mean I got to do it again today? Well, it does, because our default biomechanisms are working against us. Our default mental mechanisms, we're designed to be negative. The negative human being is the caveman that survived. A negative thing in a caveman's environment will kill you. A positive thing in a caveman's environment doesn't need to be paid attention to because it's not going to stop your existence. So we do overreact to negativity. What does that mean? You got to have a regular practice of gratitude, of curiosity. There's a bunch of things that you just got to do to override the system, and you got to do it regularly because you get into a downward spiral otherwise.
Welcome to Successful with ADHD. I'm Brooke Schnittman. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Successful with ADHD. Today, I am starstruck with my husband's first love, Chris Voss. He is a former lead FBI negotiator and dynamic speaker who debunks the biggest myths of negotiation. Chris engages all groups with captivating stories, insights, and extremely useful tips for business and everyday life. Chris has lectured on negotiation at business schools across the country and has been seen pretty much everywhere, including ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, and has been featured in Forbes, Time, Fast Company, and Inc. Chris's keynotes are based on his book, Never Split the Difference. Very warm welcome, Chris. Thank you for being on Successful with ADHD.
Yeah, my pleasure, Brooke. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And I make fun of, so I have ADHD and so do my clients and so does my family. So I make fun of myself in the fact that I highlight everything because everything, I sometimes have a hard time understanding what's important and what's not. If you take a look at your book here, and I opened it up, is my husband's copy. Every single line is underlined and with notes on it. That's how valuable your book is. He just took endless notes. We both have listened and read it like 20 times. We've engaged in your Black Swan course. If you couldn't tell, we're huge fans. So again, huge thanks. So many people know you as an FBI negotiator, but you really are an expert communicator. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, communicator, collaboration, that's what I think negotiation's about. And communication in terms of listening.
And really listening, huh?
Yeah, actually listening. And it was an executive I was talking to, I don't know, some months back, and he was saying how he and a fellow CEO they do a lot of business with, the two of them, where they're sitting there watching their people talk to each other. They're watching negotiations break down that they should be making. And he said, it's due to miscommunication. And I said, is it in miscommunication, is it because people aren't speaking clearly or because people aren't listening? And he says, no, it's people not listening. So I think the real key is to be actually listening, which takes some effort too. It's not that easy. You know, it's not easy to listen. It's not,
especially when you don't necessarily agree with what the other person's saying, right? Or we want to jump to the answer because we feel like we know what they're getting at, but it's taking too long for them to get there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So what kind of strategies would you give someone, especially with ADHD? Because we have executive dysfunction. We daydream when people are talking to us. If we're not interested, we usually miss half of the conversation, if not more. We also have working memory issues. So if there's too much being said, it's hard for us to hold on to multi-steps.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's a supplemental stuff in the communication. Like there's a ratio that I like a lot. It's very unscientific, called 7:38:55. And a lot of people that communicate verbally for a living really believe it's a good ratio. And 7 plus 38 plus 55 equals 100. What it is that the communication comes across 7% in the words, 38% in the tone of voice, and 55% in the body language. Now, if all you're listening to is the words, everybody has the bandwidth to absorb just the words all by themselves. And I think that's why a lot of people, their minds wander, they multitask, because you can keep track of the words easily. The brain has, in very unscientific terms, the ability we speak at about 140 to 160 words a minute, and the brain can absorb 400 to 600 words per minute. So that leaves all this excess bandwidth if you're only paying attention to the words. But if you're looking at the whole alignment, if you're listening as much to the tone of voice and then kind of doing math in your head, does the tone match the words? How do you add focus, or how do you take that excess capacity and make it work together? You start doing a comparative in the conversation. Do the words and the tone and the body language match up? And if they do, awesome, like we're on track. But if they don't, then you ask yourself, all right, something must be behind this. Now what do you do? How do you catch somebody when you're lying? Everybody lies to some degree at some point in time. Catching somebody holding information back and not telling the truth is not the challenge. The challenge is getting them to tell you the truth. So when things don't add up, how do you get the person to talk about it, to bring it out? And it's often something just as simple as a label. Like, it seems like something just crossed your mind. If you're consistently trying to label someone in a conversation, that also brings your attention back down to them. It helps you add tone of voice and words together, and it helps you discover what's lurking beneath the surface that you're missing. And it's not always implied by what they're saying. So if you look at communication kind of as this game that you could play.
And we love games with ADHD.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I was going to say, my guess is not really being familiar with ADHD, but I would imagine, I would speculate, I would hypothesize that the ADHD community does love games, because it's the opportunity. There's a lot of information, and you got to pick up on all of it and try to add it all together. Communication could be the same kind of a game. How what's the words? What's the tone? What's the look on their face? What do I guess it means, as opposed to what do I wish it means, or what should it mean? Where should they be going? If it becomes a guessing game, then you have a tendency to be a little bit more absorbed by the communication and pay closer attention.
Yeah, I love the gamifying piece, and that 55% is body language. I always thought, for whatever reason, that body language was 80%, and that so much can be said with body language.
Well, it might be, depending upon the context. The 7:38:55 ratio is not a hard number. And what really is important is, if body language is 80%, there's still a 4-to-1 ratio to what's being said. So, the game is in the tone of voice and the body language. And then I would contend that, especially if you're in person, I think everybody has an actual physical energy.
Yes.
And I think some of that is communicated as well in person. And the real dilemma with Zoom is not that you're not seeing the person's whole body. We're seeing as much as we would be seeing if we were sitting at a conference table. What we're missing is the energy that would be in the room. And I think there is, we just haven't learned how to measure it yet, but I think it's there.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So speaking of Zoom, I know a lot of us have Zoom fatigue. Do you have any ideas or suggestions in someone whose job has totally converted to Zoom or video conference to be able to sustain attention throughout the day with that?
One of the guys in my company, Derek Gaunt, has got a standing desk that actually lifts. He spends a lot of time on a screen because we train online a lot, and Derek is our best coach, and he coaches people through negotiations constantly all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. So he's on Zoom, and he's got this raising and lowering desk, and he stands a lot, and sometimes when I get fatigued, sitting is not that good. What are they? There's a cliche, sitting is the new smoking.
Wow, I didn't hear that, but I get that.
Yeah. I wish I would have coined that term personally, but I've got different elevating platforms to put my computer on, and especially in the afternoon when the biorhythms are down. I'll stand. Get on your feet, even if it's just to stand at your desk for a few minutes.
Yeah, I like that. Having this, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm on a standing desk, and you're right. If I sit all day, my joints are so tight. I feel like I'm 80 years old. I'm just completely like shrunk. So yes, I like them being able to move, whether you're neurodiverse or not.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that you had mentioned that helps in understanding what they're trying to say and really listening is by looking at body language, hearing what they have to say. That, and I mean this respectfully, so I want your wisdom.
Oh, here we go. Respectfully. All right.
Respectfully. Do I have you on edge?
Yourself.
Am I giving you a shit sandwich? For someone with ADHD, they can take in lots of different stimuli, right? So that might not be hard for them to look at all of that. But at the same time, when they're really trying to look at the body language, the facial expressions, the way someone's communicating, their tone, it can distract them from what the person's actually saying. And then they can totally miss everything that they're saying. So do you have any recommendations in when you're missing what a person is saying to bring back attention to what they have said without offending them?
Yeah. One of our skills, which we refer to as the mirror, which is not the body language mirror, the hostage negotiator's mirror, the black swan's mirror, is just a repetition of 1 to 3-ish words. Could be repeating one word. Could be up to 5. It's never really more than 5, because then you're getting into paraphrasing. And the mirror skill, when we teach it, is repeating the last 1 to 3 words, which if you're having trouble paying attention, you got distracted, you can probably pull up out of the dim recesses of your short-term memory the last 3 words that were just spoken. Now, what that does is it brings the conversation back to whatever you've mirrored. And it does so in a way where the person that's talking doesn't feel it's redundant. The mirror has kind of a funny mechanism in the brain in that you won't repeat it the same way. If I mirror you, you'll say the same thing only with different words. You change the words. Versus if you say something that I either missed or I want to know more about, if I say, what did you mean by that? What did you mean by mirroring? You're probably going to repeat it exactly the same way, sort of like an American overseas, where is the Eiffel Tower, to a French person? Just say it again, only louder.
Right.
But the mirror triggers something in the speaker's brain that the person who mirrored them is saying, like, look, I'm really interested. I'd like to know more about that point. I heard the words you said and they weren't enough for me. So I'd like you to go back and expand. And all of that gets communicated by just repeating the last 1 to 3-ish words, or 1 to 3 words selected. You can move it around. It doesn't have to be the last words. But the mirror in particular is great for going back and covering ground on stuff that you may have missed, or your gut is telling you there's more there. Like, there was something about that bothers me. It might be the tip of the iceberg. So you can mirror that particular portion, and the speaker loves it. People love to be mirrored.
Now, I know there is one type of group that doesn't love the mirror, right?
Well, let me see. Sometimes when people are particularly guarded, we believe that there's 3 types: assertives, analysts, and accommodators. Now, assertives love to talk. So mirroring them will keep them going all day. Like there's a story in my book. One of my employees told my son in advance, when we get to work today, I'm going to mirror Chris. And that's all I'm going to do. And we're sitting. This dude's name was Keenan, and Keenan had been mirroring me, and I've been yammering for a good 45 minutes at a time. And finally, my son Brandon goes like, oh, God, I can't take it anymore. He's been mirroring you for the last 45 minutes, and you didn't even know. So the assertives love to be mirrored. Now, the analyst, the highly analytical type, deeply introspective. Occasionally, you'll mirror them, and they'll give you a 1-word response. Now, what that really is communicating, if someone's response is very limited, is they're guarded. Now, they're guarded because you haven't earned their trust. They're guarded because they're concerned you're not listening. They're guarded because something else is bothering them. It's basically those three things. So when you mirror them, then you can shift over to a label. Simply, if I mirror you and you give me a one-word answer, I'll probably say, seems like I haven't earned your trust yet.
Ooh,
and that
good.
1-2 combination is going to draw you out one way or another. If it's true, you're going to open up. If it's not true, you'll actually correct me. And that's another form of opening up. So if somebody doesn't like to be mirrored, then they're probably a little more desirous of being labeled, to being drawn out. And you just have to simply demonstrate that you're going to listen, and that you're not going to be the aha listener that catches them in a moment.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My husband used that on me when we first met, and I must have been guarded and he didn't earn my trust yet. So I'm like, will you stop repeating back what I'm saying? Let's move on.
Well, when you first met, huh? I gotta check this guy out. He's gotta pass a few tests.
Like, what is he doing? Exactly. You don't have my trust yet. We both come with baggage. Give me some time.
Right.
That's great. I love that. Of course, my memory is like all over the place right now. So I'm trying to remember what I was going to say when you were talking.
That's all right.
Anywho.
I yammered on for an extensive period of time.
I love it. I love it. I was really listening. So I can probably repeat back what you said, but I don't have the next thing. And you know what? That actually brings up a good point. When we try so hard to listen, right? You talk about the mirroring, right? But like with impulsivity, with ADHD, we don't want to lose our train of thought when someone else is talking. They might have said something that springs up another point to like defend their stance or whatever. What is a recommendation when you're trying so hard not to lose your train of thought, but you also want to listen?
Well, if there's something, it's really necessary for me to get out, and it's not an aha, gotcha sort of thing. I'll say, look, I'm sorry, I got to bring this up. I apologize. I use apologies as warnings for behavior that might otherwise be disruptive or offensive. There's kind of a sequence if you're gonna risk offending someone. It's a little bit like if you slap somebody in the face and then apologize, or if you apologize to let them know a slap in the face is coming. They're going to appreciate the warning. We've had a lot of discussion about apology, the words I'm sorry. Is it weakness? And especially historically, probably 5, maybe 10 years ago, I don't know if it's as true as it used to be. A lot of people were telling women, don't ever apologize. Women apologize too much, as if the words I'm sorry were in and of themselves wrong. Like, I apologize all the time, just before I get ready to assert, just before I get ready to interrupt. And I may even apologize twice before I disagree. I'm texting with some friends on a group chat just yesterday, and somebody wanted to do something that I have no desire to do at all. And I started with an apology. I said, I'm sorry, I'm afraid, I'm just not good at that. I don't want to do it. And it landed much more nicely. So if I got something I got to say, I'm gonna open it up. Look, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I got to say something right now because I'm gonna lose my train of thought. And it'll be more acceptable.
Yeah, I like how you're giving people permission to do that, because you're absolutely right. There was such a negative connotation for saying sorry, and with ADHD, we're people pleasers very often. So we are apologizing for like our mere existence. So using it in a way where it's helping you communicate better and gain control of your thoughts, I love that. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah, and a desire to collaborate. And if you don't want to collaborate with me, then okay, maybe we shouldn't be talking to begin with, right?
Right. I feel like I know the answer to this already, but if two parties know your communication tactics and have studied you, AKA my husband and I, Do you feel like there's ever a chance that you can have effective communication with your communication strategies without feeling like it's manipulative?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it comes up in a lot of contexts. What these skills are highly effective skills, highly effective tools, which makes them really neutral. It's more what they're being used for. Like, we use these skills in my company. I mean, there's 26 of us. We use them on each other all the time, constantly, because we're trying to accelerate our collaboration. And my favorite analogy is a scalpel. In one person's hands, it's a murder weapon. In another person's hands, it's a life-saving tool. It's in the hands of the user. And so, yeah, we use the skills all the time. Now, I can smell when somebody's using them against me, and that happens not all the time, but not infrequently. And if intention has a smell, as somebody once said to me, if it's triggered my gut instinct that somehow I'm being manipulated, I'll give you a little rope. I'll test you a couple ways. But if you're using the stuff against me, then I just break off contact.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah. Also, can you get into the science of the brain that you've learned and quoted from Daniel Kahneman for our listeners?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of interesting brain science out there that this works with, and the Kahneman stuff really has to do much more with prospect theory. I mean, Kahneman's got some interesting stories about instinct that I really like too. But prospect theory, Kahneman Nobel Prize, behavioral economics, 2002, I believe, and the Cliff Notes version of it is a loss stings twice as much as an equivalent gain. Losing $5 feels like you lost 10. And there's a lot of versions around that. People are more likely to make a decision to avoid a loss than they are to accomplish a gain. So the impact of loss, I refer to it as bending reality. It distorts your vision of what just happened by double. And it's one of the most powerful skills in communication, which is why using loss, the prospect of loss without empathy, makes you seem like a Bond villain, like a really bad person. And it is highly influential. So you got to use empathy, you got to use appreciation, you got to use a lot of emotional intelligence in order to wield this tool because it's so powerful. Quite a number of years ago, I had to renegotiate contracts for people that I was hiring and who were also friends. And for a short period of time, I needed them to take a 75% cut of pay.
Oof.
But that was the reality of the situation. And they knew me to be an honest guy and a straight shooter, which put me in a position to be able to deal with this kind of an issue. If I was constantly trying to get over on somebody, I wouldn't have the reputation for integrity to be able to breach this subject. But I started out by saying, look, I got a lousy proposition for you, which is a version of, I got bad news coming. I'm sorry, I'm afraid. You ain't going to like what I have to say. And then I said, here's the reality of what I could pay over the next few months. I wanted to offer this to you first before I took it to somebody else. Now, this is triggering Kahneman's lost theory. Now the money is theirs to lose, not to gain. And the reality of the situation, which I had one of them say, he said, give me 24 hours to think about it. He called me back and he said, well, $500 a day beats $0 a day. I needed him to make a comparative of if he didn't accept what I could pay in that time frame, then he wasn't going to get paid at all. Now, if I'd have started out by saying, look, this is all I can pay and you can take it or leave it, but if you leave it, you get nothing. That's inflicting loss with no empathy, with no emotional intelligence, with no appreciation. And the impact of that would have made me the biggest jerk in the world and probably would have destroyed our relationship because loss is that impactful. So it's this really powerful tool that Danny Kahneman told us works on all human beings, which is why I got the Nobel Prize for it, because it's on all people. It's not on Americans. Kahneman happened to be Israeli. It's not on Israelis. It's not on English speakers. It's on humans. But loss is twice as much as an equivalent gain. And so you got to be careful with this powerful weapon.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. Now, someone who's not in your position, who's not an expert communicator and is trying to learn these tools, would you recommend that if they're going into a difficult conversation like that, they write down their script ahead of time just to make sure that they're bringing in tactical empathy?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to get yourself started. And if you're writing it down, to put a fine point on it, handwriting is always better than typing. I haven't seen any hard science before it, but some of the things I've heard I believe to be true. A friend of mine once said you retain 40% more if you handwrite versus if you type. My theory is if you're typing, you've got 10 fingers, ideally if you can type with 10 fingers, that are multitasking. Each finger is engaged in a different task simultaneously, which is bad for the brain. But when you're handwriting, you've got all 5 digits on one hand focused on one thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why handwriting is more effective, because it forces your brain to concentrate. I've also found myself I memorize things better when I handwrite, and simultaneously, I have more creative ideas when I'm handwriting.
I agree. I heard that as well, and I haven't seen the science either, that your working memory improves when you're writing something down, so you're more likely to retain it. A principal told me that once.
Yeah. And I thought it through, and I'm like, all right, so I got all 5 digits working together. It's drawing more of my brain into the same place. To me, I mean, that's my reason why it works.
Yeah. Something spurred a thought when you were talking about our attention being all over the place when we're typing, because we have 10 digits that are in different keys. Have you changed your approach in communication now compared to when you first started years ago? Because everyone's attention span has shortened.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've always tried to listen really well. My biggest struggle is tone of voice. As a natural born assertive, if I don't watch it, the assertive's tone of voice is the tone that's is pretty much always counterproductive. And then also, I've told people that I have a resting serial killer face. If I'm listening intently, I'm going to scare you because, I'll be listening so intently, you'll think, I'm imagining chopping you up and having your liver with fava beans and a nice Chianti or something like that.
So people have a hard time looking at you when you're listening intently.
Oh, they're scared and I've actually had people say that a number of years ago. I'm trying to decide, I joined the National Speakers Association a long time ago before the book came out, and I attended a meeting in LA, and the speaker, she's a phenomenal speaker, just absolutely phenomenal. I learned so much from her. And it was a small group. There's probably only about 20 of us in a room, not a big room. And I came up to her afterwards, and when I got to know her, she's like, "Look, you scared me. I mean, the way you were looking at me when I was talking, I didn't know what you had in mind. Whether you want to kill me or what you want to do." Like, yeah, I know. I'm sorry, I got a serial killer face.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. My husband, he has a very serious look on him as well. So I'm always thinking that he's mad or agitated about something. He's like, "Well, yes, stop it. You're pissing me off."
I'm listening. Come on, sweetheart. That's my look of love.
Come on. Yes, exactly. Don't you see I'm smiling inside? No, I have no idea. Your face never changes.
Yeah.
And then he looks ridiculous when he actually tries to change his face. Like it looks goofy.
Yeah, like it's painful, huh?
Exactly. So another question, if you don't mind, accurate thinking, I know, is a strategy you teach in effective communication. And with ADHD, we very often have a hard time differentiating between story and fact because of our past negative experiences, trauma, rejection, shame. Do you have any strategies to help in understanding fact from story with accurate thinking?
Every human being, and clearly people with ADHD have it the issue intensified. So, I'm not trying to make it sound like everybody has the same challenge. They don't. But there's a certain amount of wiring. We're all wired to be negative. I think of it as mental hygiene. I need a consistent practice of positive mental hygiene. The same way we need a consistent practice of positive oral hygiene, which means you got to brush your teeth twice a day. Well, I brushed my teeth yesterday. Does that mean I got to do it again today? Well, it does, because our default biomechanisms are working against us. Our default mental mechanisms, we're designed to be negative. The negative human being is the caveman that survived. And I've heard a lot of discussions of it. The negativity in particular, a negative thing in a caveman's environment will kill you. A positive thing in a caveman's environment doesn't need to be paying attention to, because it's not going to stop your existence. So we do overreact to negativity. What does that mean? You got to have a regular practice of gratitude, of curiosity. There's a bunch of things that you just got to do to override the system, and you got to do it regularly. And it could be a whole variety of issues, because you get into a downward spiral otherwise. One thing is a gratitude exercise to start your day. Another thing that I've found that I'm inconsistent at, somebody pointed out an exercise to me the other day: find 3 new things in my environment that I like every day, 3 new likes every day. But there's got to be some sort of intentional override of the system. Otherwise, you will get into a downward spiral.
Absolutely. I heard somewhere that 80% of our thoughts are negative and 95% of our thoughts are repetitive. So if you think of it that way, and that's everyone, and then you add ADHD to the mix, and we are receiving 10,000 more negative messages in childhood than a neurotypical. So it's hard. And I like what you said about like the negative caveman, because it's true. Like I don't know if it's generational or what, but in order to survive, we had to constantly be on alert.
Yeah.
We had threats in front of us all the time.
Yeah. Because negative stuff will kill you.
I have another question going back to tactical empathy. So with emotional dysregulation, it's hard sometimes to understand what the other person is feeling or what we're feeling too. How can you tap into that?
Intentionally making it what I'm listening for versus the words. Like if I lay back and just kind of forget about what you're actually saying and focus on the emotions behind it, then pretty soon I'll know what you're going to say before you say it. Now, that sounds easy, and it's a lot harder to execute. But there have been points in time in my life, back when I was volunteering on a crisis hotline in New York City, and I just get it in my head, just emotion label all the time. And I've had people say, wow, you're reading my mind. And my reaction would be like, well, I was reading your emotions, and you felt like I was reading your mind. So, what am I listening for? As soon as I start getting into the habit of listening exclusively for emotions, you're going to feel very connected to me, and I'm going to miss a lot less.
Can you give like 1 or 2 things that you now can tune into when someone is talking to help them listen into emotions?
There's some pretty educated guess. What's the educated guess I'll make in advance? I'll take a look at your face and guess, like, all right, so you look preoccupied. If you're preoccupied, there's something you're worried about, you're concerned. People are rarely preoccupied with positivity. They're usually preoccupied with negativity. So I'll start saying like, what's going on here? And I'll say, you look concerned. The type of emotion, there's a bit of a timeline. If you're concerned, you're worried about something in the future. If you're angry, you heard about something that happened in the past. The type of emotion is going to tell me on a timeline in your existence. Is it in front of you or is it behind you? And then I'm going to start to get more clues as to what's going on, even pointing it out to you. Understand the difference between anger and frustration. Those are 2 very different problem sets that you're struggling with. Frustration is about the future. Anger is about the past. I'll begin to look for clues in your life timeline of the emotions that you're struggling with. It's going to tell me where your attention is.
I like that. Because when you were on the phone at the crisis hotline, you weren't seeing them. So you
Right.
had to understand the timeline of their history.
Or just dial
Yeah.
into the voice only. I mean, it's a great exercise for just dialing into voice, period. Like there's so much information in the voice. If you're confined, I don't know. There's sort of the stereotype that when somebody goes blind, that all their other senses become heightened. And maybe it's just because they're caused to focus on their hearing because their sight's taken away. And if that's true at all, I would analogize that to a crisis hotline on the phone.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And one of the last questions I have is when people disagree, right? We're talking over each other. We just can't get to a resolution. You say compromise is bullshit. So, and there's like valid reasons for you saying that because everyone loses in that. So, what do you recommend if people, two sides, just cannot agree on something?
When people disagree, the first and biggest, and it's not the only chunk, but the first and biggest obstacle in disagreement is whether or not somebody actually feels heard. And when you feel heard, actually a number of different neurochemicals kick into gear, which change the conversation. That's why empathy seems like, what good is it to do to let somebody know that they're understood? Well, if I can make you feel understood, most likely you're going to get hit of the neurochemicals oxytocin and serotonin, just by the feeling of being truly understood. So what does oxytocin do? Oxytocin bonds you to me, and oxytocin also inclines you to tell the truth. It was a nuance I picked up on Andrew Huberman's podcast. He was talking about relationships and oxytocin.
I love Andrew Huberman.
And he kicked that one out, that if you're more honest when you get your own oxytocin. I was like, oh, that explains a lot. And then the kicker of serotonin is the feeling of satisfaction. So you're satisfied, you want less. Just by feeling that you were heard. So imagine the amount of disagreement that's going to go away if you bond to me, you're more honest with me, and you're more satisfied. That's going to cause a lot, if not all of the disagreement, to go away. And a lot of disagreements are simply over being heard. So I will cut down a lot more of this, or I may get clues to the rest of it. Like I'm listening to a big consumer podcasts in general, Andrew Huberman and Lex Friedman, both. I'm listening to Friedman's interview of Mohammed El-Kurd, a Palestinian poet. I've been listening to it intensely over the last couple of days because of the current situation in Gaza. And Lex asks these great questions in a very empathic, non-judgmental. I believe in the beauty of communication, the beauty of all mankind. And he's asking Mohammed El-Kurd, does he have hate in his heart? And he asks him in such a nice way that Mohammed El-Kurd says he does. And then he kind of says, why are you hanging on to it? How's it helping you? He says it far more eloquently than that. And El-Kurd says that it helps him retain his dignity. Now, I would never have guessed that in 9 billion years. Like from a distance, it's a cliche that hate is taking a poison hoping somebody else dies. It poisons you and not the other person. And I've always been mystified to some people's determination to hold on to hate. And when he said that, I thought, oh my God. Yes, of course. And that's why some people have such a horrific time letting go of it. And I thought, well, the next time I'm in a conversation, I'm going to have more an appreciation for the emotional driver over there, because as a human being, they're trying to hang on to their shreds of dignity, which now opens up another avenue of resolution and helps me appreciate even more the need to work to preserve the other side's dignity, or to even recognize that in a conversation. And nuances like that come from actually hearing somebody out. So there's a really good chance in an intractable disagreement, if you're really looking to hear somebody out, there are going to be clues to a whole new avenue of resolution that would never have occurred to you if you didn't step through a couple of the initial doors.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and Lex Friedman is Jewish too. So, to be so empathetic and wise with his words about the war in Gaza, it's powerful. I saw him with Elon Musk too. That's a powerful interview as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big Lex Friedman fan. I think, I love listening to his approach.
Yeah, just so calm. His tone of voice is calming, and he doesn't really give too much opinion. It's more just thoughts. What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, and good questions.
Great questions. Agreed. And this is a side note to ADHD, but since you brought up Gaza, do you think that the world can ever not have war?
I don't know that we're ever going to escape it entirely. Does that mean that I'm still not going to do as much as I could possibly do to deactivate as much of it as possible? And I personally am willing to accept fighting that losing battle. Everything that I can possibly do to impact, to increase empathy. The more we increase understanding, empathy is not agreement and empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is not compassion, although it's a compassionate thing to do. So the more that we can add just simple understanding of one another and respect will diminish war as much as we possibly can. Whether or not we can ever escape it, probably not. Let me just diminish it as much as possible.
And this term, I don't know if I'm quoting it correctly. Is it white slating, where you just fall on the sword and essentially apologize for everything that has taken place and try to move forward so the person's listening?
It's probably close to what you're talking about. And we've got a strategy called the accusations audit, which is me recognizing the accusations you either do, might, or will have against me, not admitting them, simply recognizing them and showing you that I'm not afraid of the negativity that you may think about me. And me and my team, we teach that to be very proactive with that. And we find it to be a great way to clear the air and to clear people's thinking.
Yeah, we do that. My husband is in sales and marketing, and he taught me that strategy from you. And at the end of a sales call, to do the accusation audit, if they have time that they need to think about it or, whatever, to just make sure that they feel comfortable saying no.
Yeah.
And getting all that out. We're not judging them.
Yeah, exactly. It's just getting it out in the air. It's kind of that simple.
What would you leave the listeners here with today? One thing, and I think I know what you're going to say because you brought it up a few times, one suggestion that you have for effective communication for all.
Look, just hear people out, make them feel that you heard them out. If you let somebody know and confirm to them that they've been heard, you're going to be astonished at how it will accelerate communication and collaboration. And it's not saying, I understand what you're saying. It's feeding back what you believe that understanding to be, articulating it. That's the only way somebody's going to feel heard, is if you check in and say, here's what I think you're saying. In any way, the more effort you seem to derail a conversation by taking the time out to make somebody feel heard, it's going to accelerate everything. Make people feel heard, and life is going to be a lot more pleasant.
I love that. And thank you so much for coming on to Successful with ADHD. If anyone wants help with communication, negotiation, where can they find you?
Yeah, well, the best kind of a two-step thing. Our website is blackswanltd.com, BLACKSWANLTD.com. There are no crazy silent consonants in there, And we put out a weekly newsletter, which is complimentary. It's free, but the most important thing about it is concise. So go to the website, click on the tab for the edge, which gives you, we believe, a communication edge. You sign up, you get it emailed to you on Tuesday morning, and you'll get a concise, actionable article every Tuesday morning that will take you no time to get through, 700 words-ish. And then plus, the Edge is a gateway to everything we have. We got a lot on the website, a lot of free stuff. And the Edge is the way to get there. So I would invite anyone that is interested in learning more to sign up for a newsletter.
I agree with that. I get your newsletters. They're amazing. And after you realize how amazing they are, go buy his book, Never Split the Difference. When's your next one coming out?
I don't know. We got a lot of other projects in a pipeline other than a book. So we just keep training and putting material out.
Yeah, I hear that. Well, everything you put out there is gold. So I very much appreciate your time. Time is money and time is valuable. And thank you for listening and sharing your gold with our community here today.
Pleasure was mine, Brooke. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Successful with ADHD. I hope it helps you on your journey. And if you need any additional support for you or a loved one with ADHD, feel free to reach out to us at coachingwithbrooke.com and all social media platforms at Coaching with Brooke. And remember, it's Brooke with an E. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.